What is up, everybody? My name is James D. Fiore, and this is Blackballed. Sometimes when you meet a new friend and they become like a friend that you will probably have for the rest of your life, you feel like you will for the rest of your life, often it is rooted in something that is super important, which is a good first impression. I can't stress this enough. Like you need to, right out of the gate, you need to be like charming and or witty or humble, not outspoken, which is why I'm a little bit surprised that I am still friends with the person that we are going to meet today, that you're going to meet today. I will do everyone a favor and just not repeat the very first sentence I ever said to this person, but it was horrible. Like if you read it on paper, you'd be like, oh, is this a serial killer biographer? This is great. And nonetheless, and it was her birthday, and it was 23 years ago this year. And right out of the gate, I said something awful. As a joke, I didn't mean it in an awful way, but it did sound awful. And to her credit, she didn't dismiss me, as she probably should have for the rest of my life. Instead, she became a person that I often refer to in my own mind as a counselor of sorts, and which is funny because of what she does today. But she's always sort of been a confidant, a person that you could just really dump all your problems on, and hopefully she can help you figure it all out. And I actually love her for that, because there was many years of my life where I would reach out to her in the wee hours and share too much and offer too little, and she was always very generous. And she is and or was a lawyer. We'll get the goods on that in a second. And she has now become a person who is a counselor at the business that shows, which is called Radiant Mind Counsellors, and her name is Tara Mesensky. Oops, I did that instead of that. Hey, Tara.
Hi, how are you?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm good.
Was that a fair depiction of the first time we met?
Pretty fair, yeah, depiction without details.
Yeah, without the, I can't share those details. I'll share them on another podcast when people forget who was I was talking about. But it's really just it just makes me look bad. It doesn't make anyone else look bad, really. But it was in the year 2000, and it was your birthday. I won't say when that was because I don't know if that's the type of information you want on the internet right now, but and it was at an after party, I believe, in the hotel room on Queens Quay. DJ Scott Stubbs, if I'm not mistaken, was the DJ that we had brought in, and you and another friend who I knew before this, our mutual friend Laura, was there, and I was probably on an assortment of very mind-altering things, and said what I said. And I know everyone's going to be like, what did you say? What did you say? And I'm just going to tell everyone on a podcast in a week. On a casual Friday, I'll tell people that. And I kind of want to open with that, not just for the LOLs, but just because you have always sort of been a person who I've thought about whenever I have kind of overreacted to somebody. Because I never have seen you overreact. I'm sure you have, but I just haven't seen it. And I often found you to be the voice of reason who could sort of like be that diplomat. Were you always like that? Was that sort of your role growing up, like the mother hen of your girlfriends kind of thing?
Not really. I was an only child. I am an only child. So I spent a lot of time around adults. So I became really just aware of my surroundings and people around me, and just sort of reading the room a lot, that kind of thing. It's but not to say that I don't react to things in life, but just with other people, I just kind of it's the observation sort of thing, just kind of watching and seeing what's going on.
Yeah, you're a people watcher too, aren't you?
Yeah. Like I can observe people, like observing their, but what's going on, what's the dynamic, what's happening inside, that kind of thing.
I know that some people might look at you right now, and the first thought that doesn't come to their mind is lawyer. But how did you get interested in the law? And take me through what the process was like being a lawyer, because where you are now versus where you were when you started law school, I don't know how many terras ago that was, but I was just telling you off air that it feels like sometimes when we all hung out, that was like 20 Jameses ago, and I look at it like that because I associate that with growing, personal growth. I shedding the skin of the guy that did things that I no longer do, kind of thing. So, can you take me through what it was like for you and how you became interested in the law to begin with?
Yeah, that was quite a few terrors ago, actually. There have been a lot of terrorists as well, and there's still probably a lot more to come. But yeah, it was when I was younger. I used to write a lot. I used to be really into creative writing and these things. And I had an immigrant father who was like, "Well, you got to pick a profession, right? So you could be an engineer, a lawyer, a doctor." And it became pretty clear by high school that my aptitude in math was nowhere near the other people's. So that pretty much knocked out all the sciences and engineering. So I was like, okay, well, maybe I should go to law school because, I think that's what a lot of people do. They're like, well, I do reasonably well in school, and, I'm good with words, and I can write well, and, I should have a profession because that's what I've been told. And it's not a bad one to have, that's for sure. So, ended up going to law school. I went to Osgood, which was quite a wake-up call from my undergrad. It's a totally different way of learning and processing information. And it's a very competitive environment, as a lot of people know, and can be quite stressful.
Yeah.
So when I got in there, I felt like I was out of place. Like I didn't feel like the rest of the people. Actually, it's so funny because we did a Myers-Briggs typology test that was the career counselor gave, and she's like, "How many people are ENFP?" And like me and her put our hand up, and we're like, "Okay, we're clearly." I'm like, "I don't think I belong in this room."
What's
Everyone was like,
EFP?
It's extroverted, intuitive, feeling, perceiving.
Oh,
And most people were things like the other ones were like judging, analyzing. Like I don't remember, but they're very concrete, like left brain type things. Whereas mine was like this really like airy fairy, not airy fairy, but it's more like in that
what does
environment.
airy
It's
fairy mean? Hold on, I can't
well,
let that go.
it's not tangible. Like it's not tangible in the same way as like analytical thinking, or these things. Like in
Right.
that environment, it's just like it's odd, I guess, to be in that place, right? Because law is a lot about judging and thinking and analyzing and these things, and I had the capacity to do that, but I do, but that's the way you learn too when you're in law school. But it wasn't one of those like first things that like I think would be something would my natural way of processing information or relating to the world.
Yeah,
So
that is amazing. Now that I'm thinking about the overlap between, you know, like the early 2000s, going to really awesome DJ parties and then realizing that you're going to law school tomorrow.
yeah,
Like,
yeah,
yeah,
yeah. So
you're like, yeah, let's talk about
no,
that.
I
Um,
remember. No, yeah, there were a lot of times where I'd be out, and then I'd be like, okay, I go to school tomorrow. Like, it's just, yeah, it's something. I mean, normally by the time I got to law school, it wasn't like being in your early 20s, right?
right.
But yeah, it's a different environment. But yeah, yeah. So I was there and I practiced for a few years and I really did enjoy what I did. I ended up in different iterations, but at the end of my time in private practice, I was a family lawyer. Um,
Yep.
and that was pretty natural for me, given sort of where my orientation was with people, because a lot of my skill set was sort of just understanding the dynamics between people and sort of kind of intuiting of what would happen if we did X or Y based on how people are, right? And how the dynamic was with the spouses and the kids and these sorts of things. So yeah, so that was interesting. But yeah.
Yeah, you have the kind of mind also that the new modern take on conventional wisdoms, right? For example, I remember speaking with you a few years ago, I think, about how I'm like, can you believe all the people that are calling Justin Trudeau a communist and that we're living in a communist country? And you said to me like that your dad, who was raised in a communist country, would be like would be livid at the idea of people trying to say that Canada was a communist country because of what he actually experienced. That kind of refusal that that I've noticed in you to say the thing that might be the right thing for the right people, I really appreciate that about you. And do you think there's an overlap there between being a lawyer and being a counselor then, because, and having a mindset like that, because it means that you're not pigeonholed. You don't pigeonhole yourself into believing something that might not necessarily be true, but is safer to say or think. Is that fair?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think it helps anybody in any of those circumstances as a lawyer or as a counselor. Especially as a lawyer, right? Like you do need to be able to point out things, that are maybe not the best for your client. You have to be frank and quite, open with them, because ultimately, if you don't, then they come down the line. Why didn't you tell me that? I wouldn't have done this if you hadn't told me this. These kinds of things. So I learned in that environment, frank, even when it was uncomfortable or even scary, right? And as in the counselor, it's a different situation. Like, I'm not telling anybody anything, right? It's just more, we're exploring things about people, their things that are going on for them, and that's for them to sort of come to their, their own understandings about things. So it's a shift.
Yeah, but there's the overlap is interesting though, because it feels like you have to tap into the same part of your mind in order to make the best, not argument that you can, because when you're counseling, you're more like reflecting what someone else is feeling, than giving them different ideas as to where things originate from and then how to cope. Is that fair?
It could be. Yes, it could be. I have to be careful about projecting things onto people based on my own experience or what I think might be going on, because that can, that's not helpful necessarily, right? I think a lot of times it's about asking good questions and hoping that allowing people, it takes time. It takes time because I think it's preferable if people come to that on their own rather
Right.
than
Yes.
having your therapist say, yes, X, Y, and Z, right? Unless,
Therapist, they'll just tell me what to do.
yeah.
Yeah, I really do. Just, James, do this. Maybe she can look a certain way too when she does it. But
Well, sometimes, yeah, like you can talk about like, behavioral modifications or like certain things that might be helpful. Or, I mean, if you trying to reach a certain goal and if it's an addiction or if it's, anything, like you need some steps, right?
yeah,
And some accountability, but that really depends on what the person's coming with, right? If some people want that a bit more direction, and then you can work with them in that way. And if other people don't, then it's up to them. Because my approach is client-centered. So it's like whatever people want to do, like not want to do, but I believe that everybody kind of knows their own way of how the best way that they can unfold towards their healing. And so I don't want to like really project something or overlay something on somebody when it doesn't fit for them.
that's fair. That makes sense. I want to go back so you're practicing law, and listen, I may have accidentally kind of created a how like wrestlers have those fake origin stories.
Okay.
Like I went to school with Test. He was a wrestler, and his fake origin story was that he was Motley Crue's bodyguard. It was just complete fiction.
Awesome.
Anyway, so I guess I created a sort of origin story for you, which I think is half true, but maybe not quite the way that I put it. But you were practicing law. You were feeling not so good about it, or at least you were having thoughts about perhaps making a pivot in your life path, and you ended up in Peru. And can you give me, because I like hearing about it, not from a funny haha point of view, but literally from like a life-changing, transformational kind of point of view, about your experience in Peru and the subsequent one or two experience you may have had after that may have sort of helped you see the new path that you wanted to go on.
Yes. So I did. I ended up leaving my job and for sort of an indefinite sabbatical, I guess. And I started backpacking. I started in Costa Rica because I didn't really know what I wanted to do, and so I thought, okay, I'll just I'll volunteer with sea turtles, and that was really great and a nice experience. And so as I was moving through, I ended up in Peru, and like I was out for dinner with a family member that I have there, and they're like, "Oh, so you're coming here to do ayahuasca?" And I was like, "No, I'm just backpacking." And they're like, "Oh, because if you wanted to, like, I have somebody that I know is very trusted, and I can connect you." And I was like, "Okay, I'll try it out." Right. So we did. I did do that. And the first time, I mean, everyone talks about these, life-changing, altering experiences, and I just really just threw up the whole time. It was a really ugly experience, actually. And everyone's like, "How was it? How was it afterwards?" I was like, "I was really sick. Like, I don't know, what the big deal is, right? I feel a lot better. I probably got a lot of stuff out, but." And then I was in Peru for some time, and somebody else that I knew there had suggested somebody else, another shaman in Peru, in a different part of Peru, and that we go there for a few days. And so I went there, and during the first ceremony, I kept seeing this arrow, and it was pointing to the right, like follow me, follow me. But I was too sick, and I was like, nah, that's not happening. And but the second time I did, suddenly just something just like blasted open, and I had the most intense experience in the sense like I felt like I was being cradled by like a universal mother. Like it was like all these old like traumas and things from my childhood and things that just came up, but it was like I was being held, and there was this, like I was being held like by a mother, and I was crying, and all the things were coming up, things that I hadn't I haven't thought about for so many years. I didn't even know they were in there. I remember they had this one vision of, and actually it kind of makes me sad just to talk about it, but like it was like a raft. My parents divorced when I was young, and the raft split open on this ocean, and I was in the middle, and I was trying to grab the raft and pull it together. And the agony in my heart of like, I can't make these two people stay together. I can't make this be okay, but I was never in touch with how deeply I had felt that, because I'm a pretty sensitive person, so I also could have the tendency to cover it up a lot without realizing it, right? Because it's quite overpowering, those feelings. And so it was really astounding, and so worked with that a little bit. And another thing too that was pretty profound for me was back in the days, like to drink and party and all that stuff. And I probably drank too much while I was practicing law, to be frank, because of a lot of things.
A lawyer drinking too much? Get out of town.
Yeah, that's sort of, yeah, I know, shocking, right? But, one of the things that happened, which was really interesting, was when I came back to Toronto, I ordered a beer at like a party or something, and I drank it. I was like, oh, this is disgusting. Like, it's not doing anything for me. It just makes me tired. Like, I didn't get that dopamine rush, like that, they get that, oh, I want to get drunk. Woo-hoo, it's gonna be so fun, Yeah. But it wasn't happening. Like, it was gone. It was done. And I was like, wow, this is really incredible. Like, I think something in my brain must have rewired. And, I know Dr. Gabor Mate talks about this, and a lot of other clinicians talk about, I'm not really sure what the mechanism is. But yeah, it was pretty fun.
You were the first person, not the first person, I shouldn't say that, but maybe you're the first person that I knew on a personal level who described an ayahuasca trip in a way that I found both profound and productive and therapeutic. And because I try to avoid anyone that talks about psychedelic drugs in a way that is just too, I don't know, stereotypically hippie or something. I think I might be guilty of it.
There's sort of a magical thinking that can develop around it. Like, I've been through that. I know what that's like. Like, it is, because it's such a powerful and life-changing thing. And you do see a lot of things. Like, you do see a lot of images, and you have these really, I mean, it's like interdimensional kind of experiences, it really changes everything about your perspective on the world, right? And So I think it's hard not to get sort of entranced in a way, right?
Yeah. I feel that way about shrooms because that is my sort of go-to reset. Psilocybin and me seem to get along. And, but I have to remind myself to have the right frame of mind going into it. Ayahuasca scares the crap out of me, pardon the wordplay,
It's fair.
because of
It's scary sometimes. Yeah.
it's not the fear of the psychedelic part of it. It's the fear of pooing in front of people. Because I hear so many stories about people going to these retreats and the shaman being like, all right, there's 12 of you here. That means 3 are probably going to need a shit bucket for the next 6 hours. And I'm like, I'm out. I can't do it. I can't risk that,
Yeah. Yep. I know that one.
I'm waiting for you to go like this. Actually, James, there's something you can do now. We're guaranteed that won't happen. And I'm like,
No, you can't guarantee that won't happen. In
empty
fact.
stomach? Like anything?
Well, empty stomach, yeah, you probably should have an empty stomach just so you're not like really throwing up a lot of things, but that stuff's there for a while, so I don't know if you can really,
True.
uh,
But so okay, so you have your experiences, and is that part of the sort of like the milieu of your life at the time that allowed you to feel confident in the career change?
it was more of like I don't know if it was immediate. It was over some years that happened. Like I knew I wanted something different, right, about my life. It opened up the possibilities for healing and the mind body connection and how much we don't really know, and what's possible. So that sort of led me, and it also like through the healing process that I had helped me heal to become more authentically myself. So that I was more confident to go in that direction, whereas before I might have been like, oh, that's kind of airy fairy because I've had conditioning around that, and things like that. So, so I think it sort of just was natural. Like it sort of just happened over a few years. So the program that I ended up taking was a contemplative psychotherapy program. So it's basically a lot of basis in Buddhism and mindfulness, compassion, and like somatic based stuff. So it was more, I wouldn't say it's spiritual because it's backed by a lot of hard science. Like the guy who developed the program is the head of psychiatry at Cornell. So he's pretty, he's one of the smartest people I've ever met. Like it's incredible what this guy knows. He's like a Tibetan master, and he's also like he's Robert Thurman's student. And
Sorry, say again?
Robert Thurman, Uma Thurman's father. I don't know if you've heard about this guy. Yeah, he's a genius too. He teaches Sanskrit. Like he was the first Western Lama that was what's the word? When you become accepted into the order by the Dalai Lama, and then he disappeared and
canonized. Is that no? That's saint. That's being.
Well, that's saint. I don't remember the word. It's like it's not inducted. It's not the Hall of Fame. It's like something like that.
Do you have to like get beat up by a bunch of Crips like you're in the gang now? Earn your bones?
No, I think back then it was still pretty chill. It was before all the things happened in China, but yeah. So then he ended up he just gave up his robes and married Uma Thurman's mother, and then became a professor of Sanskrit and Tibetan studies. And guy's a genius. So he was the teacher of the guy who developed the program, who was basically my teacher.
Oh,
so
awesome.
and he was really he knew about that meditation and these things were so helpful, but it was his mission to be like, okay, for this to be accepted by the mainstream, I have to back it up with the science. So he did. It was I found really incredible because you don't see that very often, I find. It's there.
So it is fair to say that I think that we often miss the boat. I think on or miss the opportunity to create new and effective ways of doing things, whether it's for counseling and for therapy, excuse me, or even our political systems. I'm often talking about with people how I feel like we need to start recognizing our political system as what it is, which is capitalism, which is like a hybrid system of capitalism and socialism. When I hear you talk about this type of therapy, I'm picturing this sort of like old meets new way of doing things and way of conducting therapy. Yeah, can you tell me about that? Because that's the vibe that I get when I hear you talk about it.
Yeah. So like it actually one of the ways they describe this one, it was a hybrid program between a school that I was in Toronto, Institute for Traditional Medicine, and a big chunk of it, like the teacher who taught me, his name was Dr. Joe Luizzo, and their school was called the Nalanda Institute in New York City. And they have courses. I don't think they're running them anymore in Toronto, but they have courses in New York, Barcelona, I think San Francisco, these kinds of, they're certificate courses. So I think for people who are already practitioners, I'm not sure what the iteration is now. But the way they describe it is like the merger of traditional contemplative science with modern neuroscience and Western psychotherapeutic concepts, because they're actually not that different at all. Like it's really, there's just kind of the different ways of looking at things. So like we would talk about things like reparenting, like self-reparenting, right? So like mindfulness meditation is kind of a way to reparent yourself. So like, when you have...
So you're saying reparent. So, okay. Sorry, I'm just making sure I heard you correctly.
Yeah, reparent. So like if you have, for example, maybe you've had traumatic childhood experiences and they're coming up inside you. And so when you are mindful, you develop a certain thing that's called affect tolerance. Like you learn to watch and hold space for it without turning away, without moving into maybe an addictive behavior. And what children want in those situations to be seen and heard, right? So they want a parent who is able to hold space for them when they're going through these sorts of things. So in a way, I mean, there's obviously it's not always done by ourselves, but they call this, it's like an intro kind of way to work with it, is that if you're able to sit with your own discomfort, it's kind of like being your own parent, so that you can have a different experience essentially and be held and seen, in a way, in that sort of emptiness, right? In that spaciousness. There's a whole lot of other things that can be, so there is an overlay, right, between attachment theory and meditation, or neuroscience, of affect tolerance, right? Being able to tolerate highs and lows without reacting, without going into fight or flight, or without going tonic, without becoming into the freeze. So you start to be able to wait, like to sort of be in the middle of the river without being on one side or the other. And, and that, when we are able to do that, our lives improve, because a lot of the times the way we react re-perpetuates similar cycles, right? So maybe it's an addictive cycle, right? If you're in fight or flight and you need to have a drink so you can bring your affect down, or if you're more depressive and maybe you like cocaine because it brings you up, or ecstasy, or brings you up to this place, right? Instead of sort of now in the middle a bit more, so you're not creating more, what they say, samsaric cycles, which can create, not always the best, sometimes really fun experiences, but if they go on for extended periods of time without any control, they reap certain other things too, right? But
I think I know exactly what you're talking about. You touch on when I hear you talk about it, that sort of that middle of the stream thing, it reminds me a little bit of Stoicism. And I am a novice at Stoicism. In fact, our fearless leader here at the Dean Blundell Network, Dean Blundell, is really into Stoicism. And as I said to him the other day, I don't think I'll ever be a practicing Stoic. I think that's too much. That requires way too much discipline and commitment, and I don't think I'm made of either of those things. But I use it, as I say to him, medicinally. So if I need to feel level, I will go and start reading. I'll read like 1,000 words from Heraclides, or from who's that guy, that conqueror there, Marcus Aurelius. I'll read something from them just to sort of level me out. Is there a for what you do, is there a big emphasis on understanding that outside forces aren't making you feel the way that you feel, but you are?
Well, that depends. It's not sort of like what is it? What's the word? Sopolistic, like where everything just exists in your head. Like that's not really, I think, true, because we live in a world full of stress and trauma, because we're all traumatized people in a way, right? So there's a collective that builds around this, and the systems that we have are not necessarily supportive of mental health in many circumstances. So we do have an objective reality. But so, like, I mean, when we were through our evolution, we never really lived like this, before fight or flight would happen when you would see a saber-toothed tiger or something. And then there wasn't this continual stress and trauma that happens the same in modern life, which is always being re-triggered through social media or through news, or even like social engagements, right? So like we still have the same neural pathways. So if somebody at work, disses you or criticizes you, it sets off the same neural pathways as if someone's going to kill you. Like these are ancient. This is the most ancient part of the brain, right? It's the amygdala. So these things are, like you said, like there is some element of like, yes, am I going to die if someone says I did a really bad job at work, or I'm terrible at this? No, but it has the same impact, because that part of our brain is what they call the lizard brain, the oldest part of the brain. So part of this process of when you're talking about contemplative psychotherapy is that you're engaging different parts of your brain. So the frontal lobe is the part which is like your executive functioning. And that's the part when I talk about the reparenting. When you meditate or you practice mindfulness, this part of their brain actually starts to become the adult, like the parent, right? So you'll get these impulses, from that part of the brain. But when you're mindful, you can just watch, and you're like, okay, that's happening again. I see that that's happening again. Okay, I'm not going to have to react like this. With practice, maybe I learned that I'll respond. Maybe I'll have a discussion with my coworker about it rather than scream or go home and drink a bottle of wine, or whatever it is that how you cope, with these things. So you become more of a master of these things, right? So it's actually, as it was described to me, it's also by my teachers, and I think even I'm not sure if the Dalai Lama or these. More of the monastic side. It's an evolution, right? An evolution of the human mind. And we have these abilities to be able to, engage those parts of our brain so that we can live a better life, essentially.
Yeah, I read something that's actually quite profound in what you just said in a way too, because it empowers people maybe to sort of even look at themselves in a way that allows them to afford themselves the idea that they can even parent themselves, like without thinking that, oh, I'm not good enough to do that. But when you're talking, I'm sitting here wondering if there is a aspect of evolution that, I mean, this is maybe I'm just philosophizing at the moment, and just sort of spitballing here, but if we are cognizant of the idea that we can be in transit when it comes to evolution. So in other words, we're born and here we are and we grow and everything. This isn't like the one peg of evolution and then our offspring become the next peg. Like we can actually make our minds evolve as we get older in order to sort of feel like we are growing, even though we're living one life. Does that make any sense to you?
That's perfect sense, because I mean, a big part of this is neuroplasticity. So, it's not like, old times used to think, okay, well, you're completely fixed in your personality by the time you're 7, which, I mean, to a certain degree, it's going to be there, but it doesn't mean that you're cursed in a way, right? Where your brain is like that and you're like this for the rest of your life. But I'm just an alcoholic. I'm just, an anxious person. I have to live with this. Like we can retrain our brains, right? And in that way we can change. Right. So I think I don't remember the expression, but it's like neurons that fire together, wire together. So the more you do something, it becomes an actual neural pathway. In fact, we have a lot of not the greatest neural pathways sometimes, like when it comes to anxiety responses or these kinds of things that are imprinted from early childhood traumas. But when you start working internally and also in therapy, it's between two people as well, right? So it happens inside and it happens between two people. We start to rewire these parts of our brain with practice, and we can change them. And so it's not like and it's also associated with a lot of things like telomere length. It's like the genes. I think the longer your telomeres are, the longer you live, and stress and these kinds of environmental situations will shorten your telomeres. But people who meditate It's proven that their telomere length lengthens. So we also have, epigenetics, right? So there's certain gene markers that can turn on and off. So if you have a gene for cancer or something like that, you may be more prone to have that marker go off in environments which are not supportive or because of stress responses. But if you can train, if you start changing that, then even your DNA can be impacted. It can be impacted on a DNA on a genetic level, which is fascinating. So
How do you explain that? What do you mean by that?
So like with epigenetics, as far as I understand, like I'm not a doctor, but it's more like my understanding of certain gene markers that are hereditary. So like they did a study with rats, and I think they might have done it with people too. But when you put two rats with like maybe a gene for, I don't know if it's for like violence or something like that, and they're put in different environments. One is put in an environment which is pretty conducive to life. They're treated well, or they're put into an environment which is very stressful and traumatizing. The one that's in the environment that is stressful and traumatizing will develop that negative gene trait, whereas the one who has the same gene marker in a more positive, nurturing environment won't develop that. So you see that also too with people who live in poverty, or in certain socioeconomic situations. That's why they say, you may be experiencing more sickness and in certain socioeconomic classes because of the environment is so toxic, I suppose.
Yeah, I find that with with people who are health nuts and people who are really serious about veganism, they're often sick more. And I don't think it's because they're vegans or because they're health nuts. I think it's because they're stressed. they're always saying stressful things to other people to try to get them to convert them, but it makes them so stressed out that they're sick all the time. And now they're trying to be the person to sell veganism or a gym membership with a runny nose, and it just doesn't work.
Well, your mindset definitely has a big impact on your health, that's for sure.
Yeah, I was thinking of addiction when you were talking about those neural pathways and how we often. I had this weird thing where because my cycle was alcohol, cocaine, and then hello darkness, my old friend. And when I was at the alcohol point, when I knew I was going to secure the cocaine, I would often throw up because of adrenaline. Which at the time I was always so confused. But as soon as I got off the phone and I was about to go from point A, which was my house, to point B, which is to where the drugs were, I would throw up along the way. And I asked a buddy one time, because no one really knew until a buddy came with me once to go get the cocaine, and I started throwing up in this alley. And he's like, "What the fuck are you doing?" I'm like, "Oh, it'll pass. Don't worry." And a little bit of water, spit out the water, and he's looking. He's like, "What the fuck was that?" And I'm like, every time I know that I'm about to secure my next impulsive substance, I guess I throw up. And he's like, "That's adrenaline." And I'm like, "Really?" He's like, "Yeah, that's what you're feeling, the adrenaline of the anticipation. And that's why you do that." And it was funny because I stopped drinking 3 years ago. It was 3 years ago last month. And I don't think I've thrown up since. I might have, but you know what I mean? Like it was so tied in, that was so tied into the securing of the drugs. And now the idea of alcohol itself makes me feel nauseous.
Oh, that's interesting. Wait, is it because it's so associated with the cocaine and the adrenaline, or is it something else, do you think?
I don't know. I mean, I smelled wine. I don't know. I guess it was a year ago. Someone else had a glass of wine, and I'm cool with people drinking in front of me. I don't care. I'm not tempted or anything, because someone passed the glass or something. Anyways, I smelled wine, and I was like, "Oh fuck!" And it was like an $80 bottle of wine. It wasn't Baby Duck or anything. I wasn't just like a sommelier snobby kind of gaggy thing. I honestly thought it was disgusting. And then and all the cheap hand sanitizers at stores smell like vodka to me. And so it's
tequila to me. Some of them smell. Like, oh man, am I in Senor Frogs? Like, this is.
So I feel like I've developed a new neural pathway where my brain is like, this is unhealthy for you, and we're gonna make you feel sick just at the thought of it, and it works. I can't stand the idea of being drunk. Like, it makes me feel weird. And you remember me at all, Tara? That is a very weird place for me to be.
Well, yeah, it's nice in a way when your body develops that protective mechanism because I'm the same way. Like I can't tolerate alcohol at all. Like sometimes I try because I'm like, oh, that margarita looks so good. I'd like to, and then it's just like, oh, it's a nightmare. It's a nightmare for days and
Yeah.
it's just not good. And like, sometimes these old habits, they were fun. You have all these associations with it, like, oh yeah, that margarita could be so fun because everyone's having fun, doing that, but you're just not part of that anymore. Like you can't engage in it in the same way that other people's brains and bodies can.
Yeah, that's
So
right.
it requires an adjustment. Like it can be, yet it requires some integration too, I think, because it can be pretty lonely sometimes too, right? And your whole world, social world is around that, right?
Yeah, well, lucky for me, I moved away to literally butt fuck nowhere, and so now I don't have a social life. So it actually worked out for the best, right? I quit drinking after I moved here too. So because there's no pubs. Like, dude, I'm addicted to access. It's really about access. Like if I live in a city,
It's too
I
easy.
still don't think to this day that I could live in a city. I think that it would take about a week, and I would probably just be like, give me all the drugs, and that would be kind of that. But I mean, I hope I wouldn't do that. It's funny. I would do drugs before I would drink because I'm just so anti-drinking now. There was something that I read in your bio today on your website, and we touched on it a little with the ayahuasca thing. But where are you integrating? Are you possibly integrating, or are you looking with interest at the possibility of integrating psilocybin and things like that into a practice based on the research that's happening right now? Like, can you see yourself offering that kind of service, say, in 5 years?
Well, yeah, it depends, right? Right now, I do psychedelic integration work and preparation, which it doesn't sound like what it does. It's a form of integration just happening beforehand. So, which if some people, this is from a harm reduction perspective, right? So if people are saying, hey, I want to do 20 grams of mushrooms, it's my first time, like, I want to talk about it. So part of that preparation and integration piece is, okay, like, where did you come up with that number? Is 20, is 20
He's
the
talking to
best?
me.
Yeah. Where do you get your information from? Do you have resources? What kind of resources could you look at, to understand what this might be like and explore safety, right? Safety is very important. So like, do you have someone to sit with? Like, have you thought about where you're going to be? Have you thought about these things? So like from the harm reduction perspective, it's like, just, be safe and reflective on what it is that you are hoping to do, right? With respect to psychedelic therapy, I don't know what the landscape's going to look like within a few years. I mean, ideally, I would hope that we could have this in a way that's affordable, and accessible to people, which, with all the licenses and all the liability and things, how that would turn out. A lot of times, I think now the research is being done with synthetic psilocybin because that's the only thing I think that's FDA approved, and that's quite expensive. So I don't know if they're going to be it's going to be a $2,500 trip kind of thing, right? And I don't know, because ketamine is already there, and so I don't
I
know.
feel like they have to. There has to be more of a customization approach for psychedelic therapeutic ideas because SSRIs. If there's one thing that I find frustrating about it is that, and I have a lot of friends who are on them. I was on them for a while, and I think I stopped after 4 or 5 months or something. I just didn't like it. But there doesn't seem to be a customizable kind of approach to it. When you talked about that person with the 20-gram mushroom thing, it's a funny example, but it's actually true. Like I've had people like look at me like, "Oh, you're just crazy, James," because I used to once a month reset by taking 6 grams of mushrooms, which is a hell of a lot for most people, but it's so personal, right? Like it's not intended for me to like walk the line of almost dying. That's what I was comfortable with. I was comfortable going to outer space because psilocybin doesn't scare me. I don't feel like I would ever have a bad trip, and so I'm not recommending it for others, but that feels right for me. Do you think that we would have to approach any type of therapy like that centers around psychedelics in a very customized way, or rather than this like, well, the average person can take 2 grams of mushrooms and feels like this. Maybe we should personalize it a little bit more.
Yeah, it's a bit, I know, because I mean, from what I I mean, I haven't read too much of the research about it lately, but I know a lot of the research that was done was, I think it was a flood dose, or like a what they call a heroic dose. So I think it's 5 grams at least. And they were done in context with people who are in palliative care, like John Hopkins University's done a lot of studies on that. And there's a specific protocol for that, and so people, I think they're lying down, they have like a blind on, they have like 2 therapists in the room, these kinds of things.
So not rapping on your back deck?
No, I mean, that's more of a personal thing, I guess. I mean, and that's the thing, like, I don't know. I mean, I don't know if it's, these standardization is important to institutional bodies in order for things to feel safe, right? And that's the medical model. So I don't know, maybe that's how it starts, and then maybe there's more freedom around that afterwards. But yeah, I mean, right now it's pretty, I think there's a lot of specificity around how how it is administered, or protocols around how it's been administered when it's had approval from the FDA for these laws to go through.
Because I may have accidentally discovered something. Let me throw this. Let me run this by you, Tara. So I, due to ecstasy use, due to prolonged ecstasy use, and because I did the wrong thing and snorted a lot of ecstasy, I have brain buzzes.
You still do?
Well, funny you should ask. So I guess about a year and a half ago now, maybe something like that. I didn't know that there was referred to as a hero dose, but I did my 6 grams or whatever. And these were exceptional mushrooms. My entire room was blue. It felt like I was like SpongeBob, like I was underwater kind of thing. Didn't look like him, but it just felt like I was underwater. But all of a sudden, the intensity of these brain buzzes that I've had for at least 15 years, and they're not constant, but a few times a week, it'll last for like an hour-ish, sometimes 5 minutes, sometimes an hour. And they just, I was like 2 hours into my trip, and they were just like, vroom, 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 like really intense. And I was like, holy shit. And then all of a sudden I heard like and they just went away. And they have not been back. And that was like a year and 3 months ago or something. I thought they were back one time, but I'm pretty sure I was just dehydrated because I drank water and it went away. But they for all intents and purposes, that trip made them go away. I don't have the science. I'm not saying I opened this by saying I discovered something. I didn't discover shit. I got really high and they got rid of my brain buzzes. But
awesome.
These are kind of things. What's that?
Great that you got rid of them. It's awesome.
Right. Is that the kind of data, though, that do you think that would ever prove to be important? Is it? I tried looking it up. I couldn't find anything. But.
Yeah, I mean, there's like cluster headaches, I think, are one of the things that people say the mushrooms can treat, migraines and things like that, and so it sounds like maybe something in that realm. I don't know. I'm not a neuroscientist or neurologist, and there are neurologists who are studying these things. Because
I'd love to get in on that guinea pig shit, like.
I'll just line up out the door, I'm sure.
Yeah, that's right. I have published evidence that this guy. No, because I always hear you hear about these stories. The one story about the girl 15 years ago or something. She was bipolar. She wanted to kill herself. She ate like a half ounce of mushrooms, and was in the hospital for I don't know how long. But like when she kind of came out of her, I guess like long ass trip, like I don't know if it was 4 days or whatever it was. Since then, she has never had another bipolar episode, and she was like. You're like the poster child for bipolar, and this is why you wanted to commit suicide, and now you're fine, and we can't explain why. And I didn't know that synthesized psilocybin was so expensive. But why does Big Pharma always have to get their bite in? Why can't we just treat it like herbal medicine or something?
I think that actual herbal substances, if I'm not mistaken, cannot be approved by the FDA because there's too much variability in the actual content of the psilocybin. That's one of the reasons that's given. I think because when they're doing these scientific studies, and I mean, there's other, if you want to talk about Big Pharma, I think there's other motivations perhaps, but like when you talk about it from a scientific perspective, consistency of the dosage is important in order to be able to have the validity of the tests. So they have I don't know know how many. This was a few years ago that I read this. I don't know now, but I think they have their sources that make the same thing in the lab, and then they're given during the test so that the outcome are, we know that 5 grams is 5 grams no matter what kind of thing.
Yeah.
There's so many different kinds of mushrooms too, right? Like one kind of mushroom can have a totally different impact than another kind of mushroom even, right?
Yeah. I have that dilemma right now. I have dilemma. Listen to me. I have like a quarter ounce of mushrooms, but there are 4 different strains in total. And everyone's always like, never mix your strains. And so now I'm afraid to take them because people are like, don't mix your strains. But
I don't know. I know I've heard of people who do that because and sometimes there are some people who are really knowledgeable about these things. Like, oh, if I combine this with this, it's going to have this impact. And, I don't know. I can't,
Well, thank you for the advice. I'm going to totally take it now just because you said
That's
that.
not
And
advice.
whatever happens is your fault.
I can't advise you on
No, but I remember once I was on acid and you were kind of like taking care of me. And this is basically what the night was like. That moment when the music is so good, you turn into a trans-dimensional space goat.
neon goat.
Neon goat. I don't know what it was with goats and neon, but like whenever I was tripping out, that's what all I ever thought of was neon goats. Right?
Neon
On a
source.
scale of 1 to neon, what color is your goat? Do you remember that?
Yeah, I remember Neonsaurus Rex, Days of Thunder Neon.
And the neon squirrel?
Oh, neon squirrel! Oh God, I don't think that's even died yet. I think that's close to hoping.
This fucking squirrel. And sometimes it was like 6 inches away. We'd be on this balcony, sitting there in Parkdale, some old house with weird people that were all tripping out. And I look over to my left, and there's a squirrel sitting right there. And it was a red one. Was it not?
I think.
Or at least
there
to me it was
a
red.
lot of squirrels going on. There's a lot of stuff with squirrels that
That's true.
undefined.
Yeah. I'm trying to get. Let me just see if I can do something here for a second. I'm gonna save something and then I'm gonna bring it up because I want people to know where they can find you. Because I think what you do is invaluable. Is this you? Oh, that's weird. How did it take the thing like that? How did I do that? Anyways, it says Radiant Minds Integrated. There you go. Okay, put your head back there for a second. Counseling. Integrated counseling and coaching. How did you make your this graphic? This is a weird graphic. I've never seen a graphic sort of just do that before.
It's actually a transparent graphic that I use on
Apparently.
my website. That's probably why you can see these things.
I like your logo. Does it mean anything?
It's a crop circle, actually.
It's a crop.
It is. It's a crop
Are you going to put
circle.
that? Do you put that in your business plan? Because maybe
No, you know what? Like I was going through this sort of thing where I was like, I'm feeling, the name for this is coming up. It was radiant. And like, I kept hearing like radiant luminosity. And I kept thinking about it in terms of sort of the clear mind, that the Tibetan Buddhists talk about it, sort of like this, I don't know how to explain
third
it.
eye kind of thing, mind's eye.
Sort of, yeah, like just a ground of reality kind of thing. And I just kept thinking about the sun and these things. And then I was like, okay, I should just start looking. I just wanted to start looking. And I found this, and it was like, somebody called it a sun angel or something. The crop circle was sun angel. It's like, wow, that, in the feeling that I got when I looked at it, I felt, oh, this is healing for me. Like
Be a cool tattoo.
Yeah, it could be a cool tattoo. I'm not going to get that as a tattoo, but it's cool.
Do you have a tattoo? You have tattoos, don't you?
No, I don't have any tattoos.
No? Oh, I
No.
thought you did.
It's too indecisive. I know I'd get
Yeah,
one.
me
I want that one. I want something else, or I don't want anything at all.
I just can't. Every time I think of tattoos, I think of all these young people with sleeves, and then I think of the homes for the elderly in the year 2065 and how hilarious that's going to be.
Yeah, it's going to be like so funny. Do you have any tattoos?
No, I don't. When I was really, really down, I was going to get one on the back of my neck, and I'm glad I didn't. It was the cover of the Khalil Gibran, The Prophet, that thing with the hand with the elongated people that are supposed to be flames, which is still a pretty cool tattoo. But then I read one of his. You really must know, Tara. One of the Khalil Gibran poems that I can't remember the name of really bothers me because it was cited by a family member who did a very bad thing, and he talked about how he plagiarized Khalil Gibran like in a moment of anger, where he was like, it's not my job to be a parent. He was talking about his kid that he never sees. He's like, James, our job is to be the bow, and the child is the arrow, and once that leaves the bow, they're on their own. And I was like, you just plagiarized Khalil Gibran, and that's not really what he said. And then when I read Khalil Gibran, that poem over again, I was like, that's sort of what he's saying. So then I stopped liking Khalil Gibran. It just seemed like a good way to get out of doing your daddy duties,
I guess, I mean, how old is the child? So many questions.
Oh, you know what's so funny? Well, he said, this is the uncle, my audience knows, this is the uncle that fucked around with my 4-year-old girlfriend and ended that relationship. And so but before that, he was like, I really liked him a lot. And he told me that he had a kid. And the kid was like, I don't know, or something when he told me that he had the kid. And when I asked about the kid, that's when he gave me the Khalil Gibran thing. And then he told me, he's like, no, I don't see him. His mom is a native woman in Iqaluit, I think, and whatever. And then like 12 years later, 15 years later, whatever it is, someone reaches out to me. And so he didn't want to be found by this child, by this man now. He didn't want his son to find him. He just didn't want to do that at all. And then, 15 years later or 5 years ago, whatever, this person emails me out of the blue and is like, do you know Danny? I think he's my father. And I'm like, I sure do. Let me put you in touch with him. Because I knew that Danny didn't want to be found. So that was my gift. It was Schadenfreude, but it was also the right thing to do, I think. People want to know their dads. Who's I to stand in his way, right? Tell me I did the right thing, Tara, please.
Only for you to decide.
Okay, so what is so tell us about your practice. Tell us where people can find you and what kind of services you offer and to whom, if you don't mind.
Sorry, can you repeat that? I missed the first part.
Just tell me about your practice and where and how people entice people with problems to want to call you.
Okay. Sorry, I got distracted by that logo came up. I was like, my brain just went blank. I was like, wow, it's okay. I think, is there a link to the website somewhere on here? Or?
There isn't, but I can put it as my name.
Okay.
The Radiant Mind Counsellors, right?
Yeah.
.com or .ca?
.com.
So is it that?
Yeah.
Radiant Counsellors. No, I missed the mind. Never mind. Hold on.
I think also the Radiant isn't spelled.
All right.
Right.
Okay, go ahead. Pretend I'm not doing this and just go.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, you can contact me through there. There's a sort of a question form, or there's also a phone number there, email, that kind of thing. There's a 30-minute free consultation that I offer. So if you want to, talk about and see if it's a fit for you and what you're looking for, so you don't have to. I think you really want to get to know somebody before you commit to something like that, perhaps. And so that's an opportunity to do that. And so mainly, I work with individuals mainly and couples. And so, it's just a range of presenting concerns. There's a list of things on my website, anxiety and depression and all kinds of things, self-esteem. There is the psychedelic integration piece there as well. So a lot of times people have experiences with psychedelics that are really confusing, and it's hard to integrate what you've seen right back into your life. So I think that's a really important space to open up for people. So there's that as well. And so, it's sort of your not run of your mill, but typical therapy, counseling type, situation.
Well, I find it very interesting. I like the integration element of it. I like, guys, go to the website. It's radiantmindcounselors.com and check it out. And by the way, if you use the promotional code Blackballed, absolutely nothing will happen, but you can just, you
can do it fun.
Yeah, that's right. No, but honestly, I'm so happy that we got a chance to catch up. You are and remain one of my most interesting friends, and I really do value you as a friend, even though we never see each other. I think I've appreciated everything that you've done in the past, as far as being just there as a counsel kind of thing, and as like a listener. And I think that you in this field is perfect. It's a perfect fit. And yeah, I miss you, and I hope that you're doing well.
Yeah, well, maybe more. I'll see you. I come up and visit
hopefully.
you.
Yeah, please do. Please do. And yeah, I need friends up here. I have nobody up here, but all my friends are the parasocial kind of friends, right? So
what's parasocial?
I just learned that word. I hope I used it correctly. It's just when you only know people in the digital sense.
Right? Oh, okay. Yeah. It's just an interesting space, isn't it?
Usually it's reserved for people, like people describe having, you have just only a parasocial relationship with that person. It's usually, I think, a negative, like a pejorative, almost saying like you don't really know that person. You just know the digital version of that person. Yeah. But right. I value my friends so much that I don't care what you call it. I'm just happy to see a familiar face. Because tomorrow, your face will be replaced with a journalist, and then the next day it will be a former cult member, and then after that it'll be, you know what I mean? It's nice to see a friend. Yeah, it's nice to see a friend.
So many different things going on. Awesome. Yeah, thank you. Really appreciate that. And
no, anytime, Tara. Anytime. Tara Mesensky, thank you very much for joining us tonight. We appreciate it.
Thanks. Bye.
Bye, Tara. Love you. She's awesome. So happy that she's on. I'm going to try to do that maybe once a week. I had Melissa on last week. Laura Creedon, if you're listening to this, maybe I can have you on next week. I just want to, it'd be fun kind of to introduce people that have only known me for a year or two to people that have known me for either my whole life or half my life. Just be interesting. We have a big week, by the way. Let me just take a look at my calendar here before I talk to you about my big week. Here's the big week. Tonight we had Tara. Tomorrow we have journalist Max Fawcett. Max Fawcett is from the National Observer. We're going to talk Danielle Smith, and we're going to talk about free speech, and we're going to talk about Pierre Poilievre. So that should be both fun and frustrating all at the same time. On Wednesday, we have Beth Seed. She is a former member of the Plymouth Brethren Christian Church, who unsurprisingly has stories of heartbreak and awful things to tell. On Thursday, we have friend of the show, Karima Sad. Karima is going to talk to us about what it's like in the latest chapter of Either the Left or the Right Are Really Bugging the Hell Out of Me. And then on Friday, we have, of course, Casual Friday. I'm hoping Ryan Lindley will be there. If not, we will still have a good time. Last week, it was Spenny and Paul Atkinson. And yeah, so hopefully, it's going to be a big week. And then next week, by the way, I have on Tuesday, Olga Tokoriak, who is a Ukrainian journalist situated right now, I believe, in London, in the UK. So that should be awesome. I can't wait. I can't wait, actually, just for this week to be over because I'm already really exhausted. But the podcasts actually make me more energized. I just have to stop doing edibles during the day. I didn't do that today. But I wanted to. But whenever I do, it's a disaster because what I end up doing is, because the kids are at school and the house is empty, so I'll start writing my book. So I'm working on a book right now, the Plymouth Brethren Christian Church book. And then after an hour, I'll get hungry and then I'll nap. And I'll get up and I'll eat and then nap. Get up, eat, nap, get up, eat, nap, and repeat. Yeah. So I'm not built to do any type of THC until the sun goes down. And then I have to wait till the podcast is over. So it's 9:04 and I will be partaking as soon as I get off this podcast, which means we'll see you next time on Blackballed.
Blackballed. Blackballed. Blackballed.